Okay, hi everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know some people are still trickling and getting lunch, but we got an hour and a half, so we got lots of time to talk about some great companies in Nevada. So for those that don't know me, I'm Jeff Clark over at thegoldadvisor.com. We have three great companies here. The Nevada Treasure Panel. So I'm going to throw out questions to these guys and let them talk, but we're going to start with Nevada itself, not necessarily their specific companies. And we want to talk about the history of Nevada, and we want to talk about, perhaps even more important, is it still prospective in Nevada that we can find big deposits, whether they be gold or silver, right? The Carlin Trend has been well established. So is there still a lot of gold and silver there? Is there still a lot to be found? What are these companies doing? How did they make a discovery? So let's start with the history. So I'm going to pass the mic down to these guys. Let's start about the history of Nevada. If you could each introduce yourself, which company you're with. And by the way, we've got some images up here. They're running back and forth of all three companies to give you kind of a feel for their deposits. So, okay, Ewan, you want to start? Ewan?
Sure, thank you. My name's Ewan Downie. I'm the CEO of I-80 Gold Corp. I-80 Gold Corp is a Nevada-focused producer, developer, and explorer. My belief is that Nevada has a very strong future ahead of it. A lot of the refractory or the deeper, higher grade deposits have been largely overlooked in Nevada, and I think that's going to be the next phase of growth for the state. I also think that some of the base metal or the CRD opportunities have been largely overlooked, even though some of the early history of areas like the Eureka Trend, where we in Timberline work, that was really where the district got its start. But since the mine shut down, mostly in the early 1900s, the base metal silver mines, most of the exploration was more recently was for oxide type deposits near surface. So there is a big opportunity there, and I think throughout the Carlin and Battle Mountain trends there'll be many more discoveries made, and we're seeing success of companies like ours and Timberline and Summa in drilling off new deposits and new discoveries.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Patrick Highsmith, and I'm the president and CEO of Timberline Resources, and we too are a Nevada-focused pure gold play. In our case, exploring. We're at the exploration stage. And look, Nevada's one of the best places in the world to be looking for gold or silver. It's also not a bad place to look for copper and lead zinc, as Ewan was implying. The histories of Nevada's in many ways almost unique, both geologically and culturally. I mean, the state, many of you will know the 49ers came trekking through Nevada on the way to California, and we even have their wagon wheel tracks preserved near Carlin. And they drove right through the Carlin Trend, much more gold, by the way, in the Carlin Trend than they ever found in California. And but again, geology comes in there. The gold was too small for them to see in their gold pans. We know they did prospect on the trend. We know there are actually some tiny little veins that were developed, but they were literally standing on top of hundreds of millions of ounces of gold and had no idea. And had they had an idea, they wouldn't have been able to do anything with most of it anyway. Not only was it microscopic, but the deeper portions of it require a lot of technology to extract and do it responsibly. But the state today produces around 5 million ounces of gold annually and around 6 million of silver, I think, something like that. So this is a world-class mining jurisdiction. It is repeatedly rated in surveys as one of the best places to do exploration and development. And even with all the challenges, I've talked with many of you about the plight of our government and some of our cultural aspects in the U.S. today. Nevada is still very much a pro-mining place with the expertise to permit operations and also the workforce to build them. So I guess the last thing I'd say is, being a mining history buff, when you look at those Nevada license plates, you see the silver state there. And of course, that's the Comstock Lode, very famous silver district. But the number 2 silver producer back in those days was actually Eureka, Nevada. And now Eureka has, like Nevada, kind of turned a corner and is a site of new gold discoveries and developments. So that much like the state of Nevada, Eureka itself, the little town of Eureka, about 500 people, is witnessing a whole lot of gold discovery with Ewan's team at I-80 Gold, and Timberline's adding to that as well. So great place to go hunting for treasure, whether it's gold or silver.
Thanks. My name's Galen McNamara. I'm the CEO and founder of Summa Silver. And just building on what Patrick was saying is that, we all know Nevada as this prolific world-class gold producing state, but not too many people know that, of course, Nevada was originally known as the silver state. So our focus is on silver and gold. And for me, I'm a geologist. If you haven't met me, it'll become obvious pretty quickly. For me, our sweet spot is going into these historic, prolific, past-producing mining places that were Wild West towns and really helped shape the early history of the Western U.S. And maybe there hasn't been any modern look at these places for 100 years. And we find that when we go in there and apply a modern approach, just with all the tools that we have nowadays, there's often or always a lot of juice left to squeeze. So, Nevada for me, I'll tell you a story. The first time I visited Nevada, I was a student. It was about 10 years ago. I was doing my master's degree. And we did a student trip from Sudbury, Ontario, with 6 of us or something. We all piled into a minivan. And we got to see all these big mines. They toured us around for a whole week and saw all these great things. And it was just, for me, very eye-opening, where I got to see the sense of scale. And I just got to look, and you can still, just from my more neophyte eyes back then, looking around in the hills and seeing all of the potential for more mineralization. And I even asked, and I thought, we're talking to my friends, well, it'll be fun. We'll come down here and stake some claims. And we were on a tour at one of the Barrick mines, and one of their senior geos was there touring us around, and I won't say his name. But we asked him, hey, we're thinking about doing this, and he very sternly said, no, I don't think that's a very good idea. So, right then we knew we were kind of onto something, right? We knew we might have something there. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, did you want to? Okay, very good. Thank you, guys. So now I want you guys to tell us the story. I want to hear the story about the discovery. So each of you are in Nevada. You've had some success. You're starting to make a discovery or have made a discovery. So can you tell us a story of each of your companies, how you made the discovery, what led you to making that discovery, what compelled you to look there, to explore there, to drill there? Tell us the story about your discovery.
Well, I guess we'll be talking. We've had great success in Nevada. We've made several discoveries. So we started in Nevada as Premier Gold Mines. Premier Gold Mines was a company that we had a mine in Mexico. We were developing our largest project in Canada, and we moved into Nevada with several opportunities. Our first opportunity we acquired was called Saddle, and the Saddle project is part of the Rain Emigrant Mine. And we ultimately sold that project to Newmont in exchange, as partial exchange for acquiring the Cove Mine. And the McCoy Cove property is a very prolific producer of gold and silver in Nevada. And there was a discovery made by Victoria Gold immediately northwest of the pit. They had this wonky interpretation of what they discovered. They had an assay error. They ultimately stopped working the property. But we took a look at the data and felt that they had missed the fact that this was a flat-lying Carlin-style deposit. And since then, we've developed that deposit to where today it's over 1.7 million ounces of nearly 11 grams of gold per ton. So it's a discovery in sorts that we made. We then were successful in permitting it, and it is now under construction. So that is a property that we've seen from beginning to end, as we expect to start mining it in about a year and a half's time. We also acquired what was called the Pinson Mine. And last year we made a new discovery we called the South Pacific Zone, immediately to the north of the existing mine workings, where we're actually mining today. And we're drilling that deposit off, and I believe it's one of the highest grade gold discoveries made in the last 18 months anywhere in the world. And you'll see a lot of news as we continue to advance that. We're driving our decline down another 150 meters as we speak, and we will be drifting towards the South Pacific Zone and drilling it from underground in early 2023. So it is another project that we're looking to advance quickly to development, and it's a discovery that our team has made. At Ruby Hill, just yesterday, why we're saying we're not just gold only at i-80 Gold, we are more than just gold, and we made a significant, what we think, silver discovery that we announced yesterday morning with extremely high grades of silver, lead, and zinc. And I urge people to have a look at that discovery in the future as we look to hopefully develop that in addition to our gold deposit in the Eureka District, where there's several of us exploring, including Timberline, who's on to something pretty interesting.
You know, Jeff, that the subject of discovery is near and dear to all of our hearts here. I'm a geologist as well, and something like what's happening at Eureka is really more of a transformation than a discovery in many ways. I mean, we even debate in the industry, what is a discovery? Some of you at our booth, we've had this discussion. And on average, we did a study when I was at Newmont Mining. We looked at the discoveries in Nevada that had been put into production. And at that time, we had a really great database, as you can imagine Newmont Mining would. And we went through that. We put a couple of students on it, and we pulled a lot of information together. And we concluded that on average, mines went into production in Nevada, or I think it was in the U.S., I think it was U.S.-wide, on average by the 7th owner. So when you see somebody putting something into production, think about who discovered it. What is a discovery? So discovery, in my mind, and some of us technical folks kick around economic grade and width in a drill hole. So if you drill a hole that is kind of a consensus opinion is that grade and the thickness of that grade would be in an economic mine, that maybe is the discovery drill hole. But realize that you may not know it's a discovery at the time. It may take decades. So in the case of Eureka, of course, we know mining started in Eureka in the 1860s and 1870s, really focused on silver. And actually, one of the first silver claims was made on some of Timberline's land position, which is really interesting. And so those folks did a lot of original pioneering work, obviously. And even as that progressed, they sometimes got into these gold deposits they didn't really understand. There's a couple of mines that went into production on our property that they encountered more gold than they expected, and that too would date to the 1800s or the early 1900s. But then there was a real boom in Nevada in the late 1970s and 1980s. And many of you will remember or have heard about that. And that was because that was when oxide gold mineralization, so gold deposits that has basically been rusted by exposure to water and air, they turn into a different mineral phase where all those minerals have been oxidized, and they make the extraction of the gold easier by heap leach. So heap leach mining became a thing in Nevada in the 80s. And we had a lot of production from our property in the 1970s and 1980s. One of the earliest heap leach mines was there at our Windfall target, and produced about 130,000 ounces there from that type of mining. So clearly you can say those guys made a discovery. And then other larger groups like Amselco, Echo Bay Mining, many of you remember those names, they explored the property heavily, drilling hundreds of holes. And they made drill holes again that certainly were of economic grade and width. But as Ewan said, very often the good stuff was getting a little deeper. Maybe it was sulfide. And so in those days, it had to be screaming high grade, and some of the technology just didn't exist to put those things in production. So they got overlooked even by the big companies. So but what does change over time is you adopt the technology and understanding of the process technology, and that changes what you're focusing on. And with our neighbors at I-80 having a refractory gold circuit, we certainly would love to develop something right next door to them. And of course, we've got the big boys, Barrick and Newmont's joint venture, Nevada Gold Mines, looking at us. So today we have drilled, and Steve Osterberg, who's in the room, our Vice President Exploration, presided over the discovery and greater definition of what we call the water well zone. A little bit deeper, not too deep, around 1,000 feet at the bottom of it, around 500 feet at the top of it, where we're drilling, again, economic grade and width, 40 meters of better than 5 grams per ton we drilled earlier this year. That's probably economic almost anywhere in the world at reasonable depths, and a lot of higher grade within it. So just want to highlight that and give credit to a lot of geologists and engineers who came before us hundreds of drill holes on our property, and that's now part of our database that we get to use to build that geologic model to help us find the next round of discoveries. And it certainly looks like what we're drilling at the water well zone will potentially be mined in the future. And Steve's name will be on a plaque there when they build the mine. So that's our hope anyway.
Thanks. Yeah, I think those are some interesting points, and we all have to, as exploration people, we all have to stand on the shoulders of the people that came before us, right? And there's a couple sayings that we have, and maybe they're a little bit cliched, but they say that the best place to find a new mine is right next to the old mine, right? And I would also say that discoveries aren't made as much as they're built. Maybe that's something like that makes sense to me. But for us, and where I think this is going, is that us looking in these very old mining districts that have a lot of historic data that can be really used as a weapon when it's put together. So I think going forward in places that have been looked at in the past and seen generations of mining, that like discoveries are going to be made in data and putting them together in 3D models and coming up with targets that way. And that's the first for us, and we're in the Tonopah area, on the other side of the state from these gentlemen. But that was the first step for us, was putting together all of the data in 3D and then drilling those targets. I think the first hole we drilled was 18 meters of about 600 grams per ton silver equivalent, silver and gold. So I mean, right there, that's like a proof of concept, and it's not really an original story. I think there's a lot of groups that have realized this now and are going down this road. But that's just really half the story. So what do you do when you're away from that data? Maybe a long trend from something, or a long strike from where the main deposits are. And when I was first looking at our project in Tonopah, we were picked up some old patented mining claims, and the veins went out to the east. And I just remember looking on Google Earth, and I could see all of these color anomalies in the rocks out there that looked like alteration. So alteration is just code for smoke. And then I looked at the claim maps, and I thought, nothing is staked. So I mean, that right there, I just got on a plane and went down there and staked everything that I could. And those are some of the areas now that we're looking to follow up on some sniffs and really try to find the extension of the entire district. So I think if you look at it in terms of levels or stages, you have that near mine proximal or in mine proximal exploration where you can build a lot of ounces. But you also can have the big swing upside if you're willing to look a little further away from districts.
Point.
I was just going to say that there were some really good points made, that often the new discoveries are actually following up on what people had historically done. And our companies, since I've started in the public sector, our greatest successes have been looking in the old saying, the shadow of a head frame. And that's where we've had our greatest successes. And we continue in Nevada. The properties we've acquired in Nevada are all historically producing sites. And we've just applied a different model to some of the exploration that was done historically. Or often companies years ago would drill a sulfide intercept, and because it was sulfide and they had no ability to extract that sulfide ore, they just left that hole. So single drill holes, and going back and going through the historic database and saying, well, there's a place that somebody should be drilling, and that often leads to so-called major discoveries. And that will continue in Nevada and other places in the future.
Let me add to that a little bit, Ewan. Just to make a point that builds on that and ties in the gold and the silver story a little bit. About 20 years ago, I was at a mine tour in Nevada, one of the biggest gold mines in the world, in the Gold Strike mine. And the Barrick boys were showing me around the pit, and we were standing at an outcrop of effectively granite in the pit, which is a bit weird. You don't normally see that in Carlin-type deposits necessarily. And I was holding in my hand a piece of rock with a little veinlet of lead and zinc, visible lead and zinc sulfides in it within a gold mine. And probably has silver in there. As many of you know, the silver will often go with the lead in particular, just like the stuff Ewan drilled yesterday, or announced yesterday. And I'm standing in the middle of this massive open pit. And we're about, kind of ways up off the bottom of the pit on a bench. And I look down 3 or 4 benches, and there's a loader digging into the blackest Carlin type ore, gold, no silver to speak of, no lead zinc to speak of. And in the same, ore body, in the same mine, you effectively have this older lead, zinc, silver mineralization, and then the Carlin-type gold, much younger. It's exactly what we're seeing in the Eureka District today. And I know some of you have been at my booth a little bit confused. Well, you're talking about silver over here and gold over here. Ewan's got the same thing up at the Ruby Hill Archimedes complex. So these things geologically, the history's there, it's very rich, and in fact, that's one of the things we look for. We want to know that maybe the same structures carried lead, zinc, silver 100 million years ago that brought in the gold, in this case, about 40 million years ago. And so there I was. I remember thinking, wow, I'm inside one of the biggest gold mines in the world, and there's this lead, zinc, silver thing. They're totally ignoring it because there's a whole lot more gold all around it. So, discoveries can be complex, to say the least.
Good. Okay, thank you guys. I hope this is all beneficial. I hope you're getting something out of this, everyone. So let's talk a little bit more about politics itself in Nevada. Nevada's always rated high, always 1, 2, 3 in the Fraser survey every year. But there's a difference between being on BLM land, being in private land, patented claims, state. So talk to us about the differences between those types of claims and where your property is and what you're dealing with in terms of permitting and regulations.
It's a good point, Jeff. Most of you will know the Western U.S. has a substantial federally owned mineral rights, and the 1872 General Mining Act was the way that was came about for really to encourage resource development in this country with all this frontier. And boy, there is a lot of history in Eureka on that subject. In fact, the mining, remember, started in Eureka before the 1872 Mining Act, so it's quite a story there. But just to address Jeff's question directly, in our case, we have a large land position that is dominantly federal mining claims managed by the Bureau of Land Management. This is a plus in Nevada in particular because the offices that administer BLM claims are so experienced with exploration and mining that you're usually dealing with savvy regulators who understand the business. They even understand the risk and the fact that you have to do a lot of drilling on these things. And it works pretty smoothly. We're dealing with an experienced team there, which is a real plus. We also, though, because we're in a historic mining district, have patented mining claims. That means that we own outright, in some cases. In other cases, other people do, and we can lease from them also. But you own the surface and the mineral rights often. That is a true private property right that was purchased through the process prescribed by the 1872 Mining Act, by which at some point someone had to demonstrate economic benefit to do so. You don't just get to buy the U.S. government's land for any reason. You had to demonstrate its economic significance, and that happened many times in these historic districts. So patented claims are awesome because, as you know, fortunately, we still do have private property rights in the U.S. for the most part, and one can access that and drill and explore and mine quite effectively. Again, works great in Nevada. You practically send a quick email to the state that you're rolling in there to do some drilling, and it's your land, your mineral rights, which is very attractive for a mining company. There is also other forms of private land, railroad land. Many of you may have heard of the railroad checkerboard that Newmont owned, for instance, for many years. And that, again, was an incentive by the government to get this frontier land developed, get the railroad built, and what have you. And it included mineral rights that eventually transferred into mining companies, and sort of every other square mile or every other section was owned by a private entity. Another aspect of working in Nevada that you've got to be very familiar with. Researching claims, we have a registered land surveyor on our board and on our team who is forever our expert on these things, because every now and then you get into these old claims. There's some pretty incredible stories about acquiring those older claims that may have ended up in your family you may not even know you have them, and you'll get a call from a mining company that says, "Can we buy your mining claim that's been sitting there forever?" So you'll see some announcements from Timberline where we are acquiring a little bit of ground in that fashion soon. So these historic mining districts tend to have a lot of that. What about you? Something to add there, Galen?
Yeah, I've had that same experience. We're mostly working on patented mining claims, which means, you can just step up and basically start drilling, which, me coming from Canada, we have a totally different system up there, and not for better or for worse. But the point you were making about, you might get a call if you have one of these old patents. I'm going through that too, or I went through that last fall on a couple of patents, and I went to visit a lady that owned them. She inherited them from her father in Texas. And we're always looking for data as well. We're always looking for where's the old core, because we could use that. So we're sitting meeting, and we're having sandwiches, and she goes, "Oh, I got some old core out in my shed. You guys want to see it?" And we go, "Oh, sure, yeah, we want to see it." So we go out to her shed, and the shed is full of 400 or 500 core boxes. So we decide, okay, well, we better stay an extra day and organize this for her and document it. But this being Texas, and we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and we opened the first box of core, and there was like 2 black widows and a scorpion crawling around. So thank God we brought our gloves that day, right? But so it's things like that you find you get yourself into when you're walking down the acquisition path. The people you meet, it's always very interesting, for sure.
Yeah, before turning it over to the big boy, I-80, who's got more land than any of us, more land than almost anyone else in Nevada, the thing I would say about it is, keep in mind, the permitting process, working in a place where mining is well established, there's a tradition of mining, the benefits of that combined with a system. We don't love our land tenure system in the Western U.S., but there was a big fight in the 90s between the Clinton administration and a couple of conservatives in Congress who fortunately threw up a roadblock to the royalty that was going to be imposed by the Clinton administration at the time. So we've preserved this old system, but the problem is you physically have to go put pegs in the ground every 20 acres. That's how you stake a claim. We literally still do it. I can stake claims in Finland or Australia with my credit card from my computer. I can do it in Finland in English, as a matter of fact. I have a little bit of experience with that one. And that's called, computer staking. And really, we should be transitioning to that. But until the politicians can kind of understand the economics of this business, and that you can impose 6% gross royalties, as they were trying to do in the 90s, on that system. Thank God we had Senator Larry Craig from Idaho, who basically drew a line in the sand and said, "Over my dead body." But if it weren't for that, we'd have something like a 6% gross royalty imposed were they successful, and that would have sterilized most gold mining in the United States. So the system kind of works. It's a little bit antiquated, but you need teams that know how to manage it. But at least in Nevada, deep experience, and if you make a discovery, you can get it permitted and get it built and join the producers that are currently making 5 million ounces a year in the state. So it can be done.
Yeah, not much more I need to add to what these two gentlemen have said. It's my view of Nevada is why I-80 Gold, compared to Premier, our predecessor, is just in Nevada is because of the experience we've had there. As Patrick was saying, the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management in Battle Mountain and Eureka and the other places you work with, they're so familiar with mining that you get a lot of support. They help you through the process. Where, as I found, I started all my exploration in Canada and have a project right now from Premier that's in construction right now. But to permit that project was very, very difficult in Canada, and we've seen the kind of the regime change in your ability to permit operations in Canada to make it more and more difficult every year we went on. And we just haven't witnessed that in the state of Nevada. And that's why it's consistently ranked in the top, often number 1 by the Fraser Institute as the most attractive place in the world for mining investment. You go to a town like Battle Mountain and Elko, Carlin, and almost everybody is there because of mining. So the people are very in favor of you building projects. When we permitted Cove, we approached the local native bands or the Aboriginal bands about, we wanted to have meetings with them to discuss this is what we're doing here. And all we got was letters of support, said, "Oh, you don't need to meet with us. Mining's great for our community." And those were the letters that were sent to the government without a meeting. And you don't find that many places in the world anymore. So that it's a big difference, and it's why our company is just Nevada. And much like the two gentlemen here.
Gentlemen, is there a threat to the 1872 mining law? It is very antiquated. There's threats every few years. I hear rumblings, we need to update it. Is there a threat to that law, do you think? I mean, there's not something in place right now, but...
I've got a story for you. This is a big one for me. I used to run a company called Pure Energy Minerals, and it's a lithium brine explorer in western Nevada over near Tonopah. And if you know much about lithium, lithium in the dry, arid climates is actually dissolved in a salty water, a brine, just beneath the surface of these dry lake beds, mostly in Argentina and Chile, but the first one was in Clayton Valley, Nevada. And this is very interesting. Lithium is a locatable mineral, which means we stake claims to it, just like we do with gold. Now think about that for a minute. Somewhere beneath your feet is water, groundwater, which has lithium dissolved in it, and you're going to stake a claim over it. Well, what if somebody puts a pump over there and starts pumping it? Much like in oil and gas, you have this issue where the lithium is dissolved in water and it moves. Okay? So claim jumping can be done with a pump. And claim jumping has caused some big problems in the western U.S. A long time ago. So in actual fact, Jeff, there are some really serious challenges because the only way that changes, and we all know lithium is a pretty important mineral these days, the only way that changes is by an act of Congress, because in about 1920, they separated the leasable minerals, oil and gas primarily, potash for another, from those which were locatable. They didn't really know about lithium and brine. That didn't happen until the 60s. So they thought lithium was solid in pegmatites. We knew a little bit about pegmatites, which is a hard rock form of lithium. But so there's a reason right there. There's a serious problem with the 1872 Mining Act because right now the state of Nevada has some problems because they're awarding water rights for the extraction of brine. The problem is the state of Nevada is awarding the lithium that belongs to the people of the United States through those water rights. So there's a super complicated issue. I'm glad to not be dealing with it anymore, but it was a lot of fun with dealing with the Nevada state engineer over that topic. But beyond that, I would just say, look, all these laws, a lot of technology has changed a lot of things along the way, and a lot of laws have segued nicely into the modern era. They take some time. But this one's a challenge because we're at a disadvantage compared to many other countries with respect to the way you can acquire mineral rights in terms of using your computer technology, taking advantage of that. Not to mention the labor of human beings having to carry pegs of heavy pieces of wood across the steep mountains sometimes of Nevada or Idaho or whatever. So probably needs to evolve some. And some of these challenges, however, could never have been contemplated, like the one I mentioned about lithium and brine.
Yeah, like the 1872 Mining Act, it was designed at that time for those people. And the point you're making now about, the pumping well, like that style of claim jumping, that's not one that I had thought of before, and I could see how that would be a major issue. But I mean, one example is each claim that we stake out in the field physically is 20 acres. And by our standards today, that's nothing. So if we want to have a property or a project that's several thousand acres, it means that you have to stake potentially hundreds of claims. But all that being said, and the other thing too is that I've worked in jurisdictions where they have computer staking, where they have map staking, and that comes with problems too, where the systems don't work right, or everyone tries to log on at the same time when a piece of ground comes open and it crashes, and things like that. It can be a nightmare. But if it's done right, it actually can be very good. But I mean, the last thing I would just say on that is that we've been using it for so long, it's working more or less. And if you start to open it back up, it might become a Pandora's box, and we don't know what we'll get, right? So, I guess we'll see what happens over the next few years, but it's probably time to update some of it.
It works in Nevada about as well as anywhere in the U.S., I will say that.
Any comment? Okay. Okay, so we'll open this up to some Q&A. People can participate and ask questions of these guys. I've also got a raffle here. I guess I'm going to pick some tickets out here and everything. But before we do that, guys, why should I buy your stock? What's coming up? What are the catalysts over the next 12 months that is going to push the stock price higher? Not the gold or silver price. What are you guys doing that is compelling, that's going to drive your stock price higher? Why should I buy your stock?
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So Summa Silver, I've been hitting on this, the historic districts that we're in. We have two prolifically past producing high-grade silver districts and gold districts, there's gold in them as well, in the United States. And hey, look, when I was a kid in the 80s, there was an Iron Curtain, and there wasn't any flow of goods or services between the East and the West. And then we had the 90s, and there was globalization, and everybody was buddies. Now we're back to 2022, and things have changed again, and there's what some people would call a new Iron Curtain, starting. So I just think number one, domestic supply of these important minerals like silver is very much becoming a green technology metal. But you think of things like uranium or maybe potash. It's I think we want to own, we want to have these sources of supply of all these metals. So that's number one. Number two, we are aggressively exploring these two districts. We're on to some very, very strong results in both of them. I think our last hole, and this wasn't in Nevada, but in New Mexico, our last hole we announced was 31 meters of about 450 grams per ton silver equivalent. And that's only the fifth hole on the project. So right now for us, we're well funded to go out and aggressively build ounces on both of these projects systematically. And that is often the time that's the most exciting, when the market starts to learn about, me being through these things a couple times before, when the market starts to catch on that you're onto something really big, things can get interesting quickly.
Thank you. Discovery. The reason you would invest in a junior resource company is the discovery potential, and I would point to a thing called the Lassonde curve from a book called The Gold Book, and it shows you that the most value creation occurs from pre-discovery to a company realizing the potential economics of its discovery. And as we've talked about, Nevada's a great place to do that. If you find it, they will come. The majors are there. If it's a big mine, you may not be the one building it. Maybe it'll be your big brother that'll build it. But there's a market for a discovery being made in Nevada. Part of that discovery is, what are you likely to find? In Nevada, what you're likely to find is large, potentially high grade, and long-lived. At Newmont, we realized that when a district is discovered on average in Newmont, we grew it 4x over what we thought it was when we found it and commissioned the first mine. That will happen in Nevada. It happened to Newmont. It happened to Barrick. And it will happen to future discoverers in Nevada. So leverage to discovery is number one. Number two is the team. I think human beings are just, it's all about this. And as I wind up and tell you more stories, if you get to know me and you see me online or something, we're always talking about people. A lot of gray hair in our particular enterprise, but we're also bringing up the young guys behind it, the PhDs. We pulled a PhD out of the oil and gas industry who was brilliant, and now he's learning the hard rock game and applying what he learned from the oil and gas guys. So people, not just have they done it before, although that's really key. We pulled a lot of people out of Newmont, for instance, and other major companies, BHP and the like. But really tenacity, the characteristics of these human beings, very sometimes a little irascible, a little tough to get along with, some of these folks, because they're so bloody stubborn. And once they're onto something, they won't stop. And I think all of us in this room may have some of that disease. So people are just a big part of it. Take a look at the teams out there, and if they're a right team that's done it before with the tenacity to keep after it, good things happen.
Our company is an interesting position. As I said, we are a mining company, we are a developer, and we are an explorer. So when it comes to mining itself, we're one of the newest producers in the mining market. We just started our production. We're just developing and mining at our first operation. Secondly, in terms of development, we are in construction at the Cove Mine. We expect later this year to start at the Ruby Hill Mine. So we have our development coming. And with that development, we expect to become one of the largest producers of gold in the United States over the next several years. And we're well financed to achieve this goal. Our company has well over $120 million in cash as we speak. And we are going to see our production ramp up later this year and into next year, which will start to see cash flow. And then in exploration, we're having tremendous success in exploration, drilling off some very high-grade projects in Nevada, making new discoveries. So hopefully we'll participate in some of that discovery curve ourselves because of success we're having in exploration. And lastly, we're one of only 3 companies in the United States that has an autoclave or roaster facility. Nevada Gold Mines has 3. First Majestic has 1, and we have 1, which makes us very unique in our ability to grow in the future, especially when it comes to refractory type deposits, which often you find as you go to depth in Nevada. And lastly, again, it's building a team. If you look at the depth of our team that we've been able to assemble, hopefully that will lead to our ultimate success. It's not just me sitting here building it. We have a team of guys who I say are much smarter than I am. So that's what I think you'll find in our company at i-80 Gold.
Great. Thank you, guys. All right, here we go. Here's our first raffle winner. And the number is, if I can pick one out here. Okay. Office Depot. No. So it starts 345-2593. Do we have a winner? Yay! Come up and get it. Darn, she's here. I can't keep it. All right, so it's a 1 ounce silver bar from the Sunshine Mint. I've been to the Sunshine Mint over there in Coeur d'Alene. It's awesome. I didn't being surrounded by all that gold and silver, I didn't want to leave. There you go. Yeah, you got to prove it. Yeah. Okay, you're good. Okay, great. So we'll open up to Q&A here, but before we do that, so if you have any questions you want to ask these guys specifically about their companies or about Nevada in general, any questions, concerns, whatever you want to ask. But guys, tell me if you've invested in your own company. Have you invested your own money in your own company? Because that's a criteria for me. I always want to know if a company wants me to put my money in, have you put your own money in? Tell me about that a little bit.
I personally am listed as the 6th largest shareholder of our company, and approximately half of that position has been acquired through open market purchases.
Awesome.
Unfortunately, I haven't. I'm relatively new at Timberline, but I'm a little bit of a problem. I'm in a U.S. company, so you should know the SEC rules for blacking out a director, particularly one who's a geologist, make it a little hard for me to buy the stock. I will look for my name to show up, but I did ask the company to structure in a large part of my compensation in restricted stock units in the future. So I certainly will benefit with the shareholders when we succeed. But watch for my name on an insider report. It's a little hard for me to buy, being a U.S. company. I'll get there, though.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jeff. And for me personally, I started the company and I've invested in the market pretty regularly all along the way. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Okay, let's open it up. Does anybody got any questions? Oh, good. Lots here. Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, so my first answer will be Ruby Hill. Ruby Hill was a project we had been pursuing for some time. We acquired it not just for the gold potential, but also for the base metal potential. It was a property we thought was overlooked, and I believe that truly had the potential to become our company's flagship asset. And based on the success we've been having both in our exploration programs for gold and for polymetallics, those are base metals with silver, I would say it's quickly becoming our company's flagship asset. So I'm very, very happy that we made that acquisition. In terms of energy costs, I think we've seen a big spike. Hopefully it doesn't go too much further, but we haven't really seen that really affect the costs of our programs that much. It's probably more manpower has been more of a difficulty than energy costs. And every one of our projects, if you come to Nevada and you drive through our sites, they're all permitted. Everyone has a road and grid power, and the grid power in Nevada hasn't changed much of late either. And we have long-term contracts through Nevada Energy.
A great question about energy. In our case, we're only doing exploration, and while we do have nearby grid power, all that'll be great when we're a developer or operator. But really the impact that we do see it in our drilling costs with fuel. We've definitely noticed it this year, but it has not curtailed our plans as we budgeted with a nice cushion of surplus funds to have at the end of this program. So it hasn't materially affected our meterage per se. I would echo what Ewan said, though. The manpower thing is a big problem. Real trouble staffing both the exploration crew itself, but in particular drillers and drillers' helpers. We have seen a very material impact from that sort of COVID era impact, if you want to call it that. But energy, we see it in our costs per foot. But Steve and the drillers have done such a good job. We're still very much within the bandwidth that we needed to drill the program on budget.
Yeah, I'll echo that as well. There's some incremental cost creep associated with higher fuel costs at the rigs, but like both these gentlemen are saying, it's the people, and First, it's the people. And drilling, like nobody can just step up to a rig and drill or even become a helper. It's a highly specialized profession. And with the kind of boom that went on and a lot of companies were well financed, there was just too many people wanting to do work and not enough people. And it always happens like this, right? And it always turns on like this and always turns off like same way, right? So that the people is the one thing, but also with that is the equipment. Finding good equipment is also very difficult, reliable equipment. And those are things that I think all of us are probably fighting through.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing to that, what you'll find is in the open pit scenarios. So we find a lot of what you call the easier mines, the open pit oxide operations, are quite large but very low grade. So the amount of material you need to move to get that 1 ounce of gold in your production is significant. And seeing your fuel price double when you have that many trucks moving your material, it has definitely a material effect on your production costs. Particularly, I'd say more so the open pits are more affected than the higher grade projects, because as we develop Cove and Granite Creek and ultimately Ruby Hill, these deposits are between 8 and 15 grams per ton. So we're moving a lot less material. So the fuel effect will be there, but not quite to the extent you'd find in an open pit. And fortunately, being road accessible with grid power, we don't have big diesel generators working. So our ability to be shielded somewhat from the energy crisis is a bit more than what you might find in other places.
Good, thank you. There was another question over here, somebody. Yeah, shout it out.
Absolutely, good question. Very important point. We fortunately financed before this sort of mini crash we had in May and June fairly substantially, about $5 million US with a big new investor out of the UK. And we are sufficiently funded with that money easily for a year if we wish to. However, we'd like to be more aggressive and watch for our news flow during the fall, and we'll see what the market's telling us about the opportunity to raise money in an accretive fashion. But we're sitting on about $3 million US, and we're about 60% through our drill program, maybe 65% through our drill program. So we're doing fine for this drill program. However, as big discoveries bring bigger budgets, we hope we have a dilemma in a month or two with a whole lot more drilling to do based on good results.
Yeah, that's a keyword, dilemma. You get into these situations, and you know that your investors invested in you so you could explore and discover. But at the same time, you're asking yourself, okay, well, if I do all that, right, and then I have to raise again, is that going to be difficult? That's the junior mining CEO dilemma when you're onto something interesting, right? For us, we've got a little over $7.5 million in the bank, so we're very well financed to aggressively over the next 6 months drill a lot of holes. And our history, going back to, we only started this company in 2020, but our history is that we've been very opportunistic during the time when there's a financing window. So, we can move very quickly and make a decision very quickly. And does everybody remember, this is the silver conference, does everybody remember the silver squeeze day? The one day we had in February of 2021 that, silver was going through the roof before, it all kind of puttered out. Well, we raised money on that day. Open the books, close the books, and thanks very much. So it's a difficult thing to think about and answer, and we all think about that, extensively, and I probably lose sleep over that, when to do it. But I think that for us, we're going to be aggressive with the drill, and when and if a window presents itself, we'll probably take it.
One thing I'd add, and kind of throw it back to you folks, if you want to swing by our booths and chat to me more about it, I'm actually interested in sampling your point of view on something like that. I've heard at this conference, for instance, a colleague who's well-financed and is drilling actively on a sort of a new discovery like we are. He's got brokers telling him, conserve his cash, don't do anything. But of course, we always say, as a real explorer, why would you buy our stock if we weren't exploring? So that's also the dilemma we have. We're not idiots. We understand that we burn cash. However, we can't make that discovery. We can't deliver that discovery for you, the shareholder, unless we are drilling. So, consider that. And I'm always interested to hear your point of view. Would you rather have our stock price falling, but at least we've got that extra $1 million in the bank so we survive and our stock won't go to zero. We don't go into debt, that sort of thing. The loan-to-own deals have killed a lot of companies. You won't see me engaging in one of those. But these are the dilemmas we have. Is some guys are saying, sit on your money. Yeah, and then my stock price will go down, and I won't make a discovery for sure. So this is the dilemma we have as the junior explorers at the table.
Who's your lawyer to do it in a day?
Yeah, good point.
I'll answer that. Drill, baby, drill. That's the answer. Okay, next one. You ready? Okay, 345 2627. Who's got that? Yay, all right, come and get it. And again, same thing, 1 ounce silver bar from the Sunshine Mint. All right, good. That was actually mine. Yeah. There you go. Congratulations. Okay, any other questions? All right, Chen, shout it out.
I personally think the whole district has been underexplored for CRDs. Most of the old discoveries from back in the 1980 or 1800s when they started mining in this district were sitting right there on surface. So these systems are difficult, they're poddy, they can occur at any kind of depth, and the lack of drilling, modern day drilling in the district, I think is a real opportunity throughout the district. And I think Timberline will find a CRD system, not if, there will be one there.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we did talk about what I call metal heritage, multiple metal systems in the same district on the same structure. And we have already drilled a significant thickness, over 200 meters of 5.8 grams silver with highly anomalous lead and zinc associated with it around one of these intrusives that's similar to the stuff Ewan's team is drilling farther north. And we've drilled narrow widths of higher grade, up to, I think, 80 grams or something with percent levels of lead zinc. So we do know there is a CRD system there on far south. You know, we're several kilometers south on this trend. And this, I believe, were some of the southernmost intercepts of that type of mineralization in the district. So it was kind of new, it was obscured, it didn't come to surface, and if we weren't drilling a little bit deeper, looking for this sulfide gold, we wouldn't have found it. And there was a significant IP anomaly there, Chen, as you know, that is kind of the roots underneath what we're drilling at Timberline. And IP chargeability will tell you about things in the rock that when you put electricity into the ground, they sort of charge, and that's including in that is pyrite and other sulfides, and also graphite, the stuff that makes some of these rocks black and moves around, is quite chargeable. So we know we've got the roots of that thing. We're not having to drill that deep yet. Ewan's team's often drilling 600 or 700 meters. We haven't done that yet, but when we do, we fully expect to see more of that type of mineralization also.
Good. All right, another question. Thought I saw another hand over here. Somebody? All right, shout it out.
Yeah, right now our most of our production is coming from residual leach. So we just finished mining the Ruby Hill pit, and now we're preparing for the underground development. The underground opportunity is why we acquired the property. Our all-in sustaining costs for last quarter were just over $1,300 an ounce. I would expect that to come down over the next couple of months. We've done 2 technical studies for the projects we're building right now, and both studies, pre the inflationary environment we've seen, demonstrate costs of around $1,000 an ounce. And that's our company's target, is to be in that lower quartile of production, given the grades of 10 to sometimes up to 15 grams. You expect to have higher margins. So we're fortunate with grade to be able to look towards $1,000 being a real target for the future. Yeah, we think we're quite well shielded from gold price mainly because of grade.
Okay, another question. Yes. Oh. Okay, go ahead. Oh, there you go. Any kicking rock stories, any treasure stories? You get dirty?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. The discovery thing is always, it kind of gets you, right? When you have some success, it stays with you for a long time. So, what's one that I can talk about that would be good? I mean, I'll talk about one that's not in Nevada. It's actually in Saskatchewan. It's a uranium discovery. And that one, it's called the Arrow deposit. It's a very large uranium discovery in northern Saskatchewan. That one was the guy that was up there. We were up there and didn't really know where to drill, where we were going to drill on this target. And there was a little tree, and the target, this was in the middle of the winter in northern Saskatchewan, so it's snowy. There was this little spruce tree that only had the bottom boughs, like one kind of straight, middle part, and then the bottom boughs that looked like an arrow pointing down. And just said, okay, just put the rig there. And then that was the discovery hole. Yeah.
That's easy, man. We should do that all the time. Yeah, I mean, I think I can tell a bit of it's both technical and sort of human and a little bit of fate and good luck and stuff. And it was really revolving one of our earlier news releases this year. As I mentioned, we drilled some excellent holes late last year that we announced in the first quarter and into April. And Steve Osterberg, who's in the back of the room, runs our exploration, of course. And we had drilled in this area we call the water well zone. And first we went in with reverse circulation. We try to use reverse circulation drilling when we can because it's much cheaper than core drilling. But of course, you only get little chips of rock out of it, as many of you would know. And there's been many stories. I'm a geochemist by specialty, and just that sort of equals nerd. And one of the things we geochemists worry about is sample quality and things like that. And I've hated reverse circulation drilling since my first job in the business, as a matter of fact. The sample quality is less. And you can run into a lot of problems when costs can escalate and sample quality can border on being useless sometimes. So we had drilled some reverse circulation holes and in an area that Steve was very excited about and I was excited about. And I was out in the field with him and we looked at these cuttings, the little chips that come up, and we could see some of the yellow minerals and a little bit of the red minerals that you can see in our booth, in our core boxes there. And those, as we've told some of you, are arsenic sulfide minerals that naturally occur with the gold. They're a good thing. You don't see the gold in Carlin-type gold systems, but you often see those beautiful minerals, and you get very excited. And so in the chips, we have these little trays you put the chips in, and Steve and I were looking at that, and he was excited, and I had seen it and was excited, and so we rushed those assays. You've heard us all complain about the lab turnaround times. They are indeed pretty bad. I remember in my career when 7 days was very routine on fire assay turnaround. It's more like 7 weeks sometimes now. So we paid the lab to rush those results, and they came, I think, while I was in the field with Steve and from a hole, and they were pretty disappointing. We were like, wow, only 1.5 grams or something, and it's mineralized, could be ore in some settings, but it wasn't what we expected. So we just sort of, what do you do in that situation? And Steve's instincts were, we just don't believe that number's right. There was a lot of water, groundwater flowing in. These are sometimes associated with fault zones. There can be a lot of water. So imagine a lot of groundwater and your rocks being broken up by the hammering drill bit or even by a tricone. And so then you can imagine the water sort of doing something to that sample. And maybe that's part of the problem. But we know in Nevada, we typically underestimate grade with reverse circulation drilling. So Steve put a core hole there 8 feet away and drilled a core hole right beside it. And that was a real transformational event for Timberline because instead of being 36.6 meters of 1.1 grams per ton, which is what the reverse circulation averaged, that zone at the water well turned out to be 44 meters of 4 grams per ton. So almost a 4 times upgrade. And now we've kept drilling core in that area. We realized below the water table, which we already knew we should be drilling core, but probably a shortfall of the individual driller or his compressor or something that made it so extreme. We've also fired the RC driller. That's another matter. But you have the instincts. You have a feel you're in a zone here, and that really did show the world as we repeated soon thereafter another 40-meter interval of over 5 grams per ton in that area. So it's a real deal. That discovery area is much higher grade than we would have thought from that first RC hole. And again, instincts, tenacity, stubbornness, whatever it takes, paying attention to the rocks. And now you can see that beautiful drill core in the box. And we would have eventually gotten around to drilling a core hole, but maybe not right there, and maybe not kick things off as nicely as it did in February and March.
So you asked about kicking rocks. So I come into the mining industry a bit differently than the two gentlemen beside me. I'm not a geologist. I took business at university. My father was a geologist, and I sort of followed him into the industry. And started a service exploration company at first, and ended up meeting a gentleman in Red Lake who I also call a mentor next to my father. And he got me into prospecting. So I started kicking rocks on the ground and finding gold or base metals, and that got me interested in moving perhaps into a public company as we sold properties. Another gentleman that I met said, "I'll finance your company if you start one." So that's how I got started. But in kicking rocks, my friend Perry and I made this one discovery, prospecting in the bush, that we thought we found the mother lode. There was gold on surface like crazy, and it eventually got drilled, and the first hole hit reasonable grade, and the next bunch of holes missed. And so it was a very local discovery, but we thought we found the next big Red Lake gold mine. And so that's my kicking rock, looking for treasure story.
Yeah, right, great. Yeah, thank you guys. Okay, other question here.
Not so much drilling, okay, but on the geology side, for instance, this PhD I mentioned earlier, he finished his PhD and he'd been previously working for ConocoPhillips, and he'd already been courted by the majors. His wife worked for Exxon. He knew he was going to get offers. And then you remember that brief period of time when oil went negative? That happened to be when he graduated. So all of a sudden it was crickets. There were no job offers for this brilliant PhD. So we stole him at half the salary he would have made in oil and gas. But there is more crossover than you might think, and we're trying to educate both industries about that, because particularly in Carlin-type gold in Nevada, which are hosted in sedimentary rocks, as I just said, you don't have to stretch your brain too much to see the crossover. Other times, the rocks are so different that the geological training is also very, very different. But overall, there are service providers, downhole logging companies that use those downhole tools in the oil and gas industry, so sophisticated. Those guys have now crossed over. They made the tools smaller diameter, so they work in our smaller drill holes, for instance. So there is crossover, and on the drilling side, there is some too. But right now, they still remain kind of quite different industries, and they're usually 10 or 20 years ahead of us technologically. 3D visualization, for instance, they're way ahead of us. But keep in mind, the oil and gas industry total revenue for just oil last year was well over $2.5 trillion globally, which is about 10 times bigger than, say, the gold industry, a little bit more than 10 times bigger. So that industry is so much bigger. Its approach to capital is very different than what we do. Human capital as well. But we're getting there, because companies like Royal Dutch Shell, for instance, ceased a couple of years ago exploration research, because they think the end of the oil industry is at hand. That's way too politically correct for me. I don't believe it's anywhere near the end of oil and gas is at hand. But the politically correct are saying things like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, the point you made about, we're 10 or 20 or 30 years behind the oil and gas industry when it comes to exploration drilling, and that's definitely true. But yeah, I agree. Like we're starting to use some of the things that they use, some of the methods that they use, and one of the things that is going to, I think, starting to take hold, and when you're drilling off things that are deeper, is a method of drilling called directional drilling. So in oil and gas, it turns out steel does bend, and they can turn these holes and they can drill them horizontally. Well, for us, if you can turn holes to where you want them to go, to where you know they're going to hit, you have total control over that. But also, you only have to drill one, say, mother hole, down, and then you can have multiple branches that come off of that. You can really save a lot of money that way, and a lot of time too.
Okay, these gentlemen all have booths right here in the first row, so I invite you to visit them all if you can. I think you can see from this panel that Nevada is not mined out. Plenty of discovery left to go. Is that a fair summary? Okay, and our last winner is 345-2626.